Hi, welcome back to our discussion on shooting, ballistics and all things interesting regarding shooting. Previously we mentioned the astonishing capabilities of the 7x57 despite its mild demeanor and moderate muzzle velocity. Now, for us to understand why it's performing so well at the longer distances, it's good to consider a heavier projectile of 7mm caliber and compare that to something of a similar weight in a larger caliber like a 30. If we do that, we will notice that the 7mm projectile is significantly longer and sleeker looking, and because of that it glides through the air a lot more smoothly. It has less drag and less resistance, and the influence of crosswinds is a lot lower on that than on the bigger caliber projectile of the same weight, which basically quantifies ballistic coefficient. So the higher the ballistic coefficient, the better and more efficient the projectile will travel through its trajectory towards the target at longer distances. So heavy for caliber pointed projectiles is nothing new, and there's a lot of people shooting mild recoiling 6mm and 6.5mm in matches of distances between 300 and 1,000 meters. If we decide to go that way and we want to pick a projectile to shoot in a caliber like that, we need to compare it with the G7 ballistics, which is basically an ideal projectile with a 7.5 degree bow tail and about 10 calibers on a tangent ogive, which is the preferred way most manufacturers build very low drag projectiles. Because these projectiles are significantly longer, we need to stabilize them, and they are more difficult to stabilize, so we need to spin them faster, and in order to spin them faster we need to have faster twits on the barrels that we shoot these projectiles out of. A lot of the F-class shooters that can't use muzzle brakes in their competitions between 300 and 1,000 meters, they love the high ballistic coefficient projectiles because it ends up at the 1,000 meter mark with a significant amount of energy and velocity, and it hasn't gone through the transition phase to subsonic. It's still supersonic at that distance, so it's more predictable where the shot will fall, and it all create extra points for these competition shooters. The BC is velocity dependent, which is probably worthwhile mentioning. So the quoted number that we see from the manufacturers is normally an average number in a certain velocity range. The trajectories have been tested by Brian Litz in his applied ballistics for long range shooters, and is really handy to stick into ballistic calculators and apps and give you a more accurate estimate of where your projectile will go. But it's still good to take your gun to the range afterwards and confirm that your range card does propose exactly what your gun is going to do. Even moderate 7mm is capable of 2,800 feet a second, which is the lowest velocity that will bring you to 1,000 meters, supersonically. And if you want to do something similar with a 30 caliber projectile, you need a lot heavier projectile. So you need to use a Magnum cartridge case and a lot more powder with a lot more recoil and less barrel life to achieve that. Now, whether you put holes in paper targets or ring steel from 300 to 1,000 meters, you will find that the 6.5s are really popular in a mild recoiling calibers such as the 260 Remington and a 6.5 Creedmoor, mainly because of the high BCs that we get from the larger projectiles such as 140 grains, and that's due to the scale factor that allow that high BCs in a cartridge case that can be handled by the average shooter. So basically this is the secret of why the 6.5 is such a darling to a lot of people. It will basically with our 140 grains have a BC of 0.55, and it used less powder than a 308 to deliver that projectile. It generates recoil between a 243 and a 308 range, and it delivers the same trajectory that will require a 300 Win Mag with 190 VLD projectiles at 60% of the recoil and using a lot less powder. So what is not to love about this caliber? What it will also do is it will give at least 60% of the barrel life of a 308, and the windage adjustments that you require for a 6.5 will be 30% less than with a 308 at longer distances, which is very, very significantly. As we all know, wind is basically one of the most unpredictable things and difficult things to judge when you shoot at longer distances. Now, the F-class guys that are really competitive go a different way. They tend to stick to 7 mils, around 180 grain projectile weight, which deliver magnificent pieces of between 0.67 and 0.69. Now, if you shoot a projectile like that, you will need even 20%, even less on windage than you will need on a 6.5. So what this allows the elite shooters to do is, if they make a small mistake in judging the wind strength or direction, or if they find that the conditions change while they're pressing the trigger, you will still land the shot in the 10 ring, while with something of less ballistic capability, it'll push you out into a 9 or maybe perhaps even an 8. They pay the price for this, and they are prepared to pay it. They use about 40% more powder. They have about 40 to 50% more recoil, and the barrel life is half that of what the 6.5 would normally give you, which is around, say, 1500 rounds on a 7mm barrel. The other advantage you get from the 7mm is it will deliver up to 80% more energy to the 1000 meter mark if you compare it to a 6.5. So if you shoot at a wounded animal running away, you have a lot better chance of bringing it down with the 7mm instead of the 6.5. So if that is what you predominantly do, it's probably good to pay the price and stick with the 7mm. If you are keen to shoot a lot more with a mild recoiling rifle with longer barrel life and mild recoil, you basically should consider the 6.5. So whatever your choice, whether you pick the 7mm or the 6.5mm, I think it's really important to shoot as much as possible, because if you have a good tool, the only difference in performance is dependent on how good the artisan that used the tools are. Now, if you found this interesting, please hit the subscribe button or the like button, and we hope to speak to you shortly. Till then.